Well, welcome, and of course, we got some explaining to do. This week on the 11th OVC is our really quick briefing, or debriefing, if you will, of the Spring Wagon Escort. Quite the trip, short and long at the same time. What do you think?
It was pretty memorable.
Very memorable. So those of you family members and friends watching us on our spot device, you'll see that there was a lot of zigzagging going back and forth, going to and back to and further on and back to. So kind of first off, kind of want to describe what happened. The Spring Wagon Escort started off pretty smooth on Thursday night. We got together, we issued rations as we normally do. We had hardtack, so about 20 pieces of hardtack a piece. Bacon, enough bacon for everyone, and some coffee, whole coffee beans, and that were already roasted, so you didn't have to do that, and sugar. That was our rations for this 2.5-day event. Slept the night of Thursday, woke up Friday morning, and it was cold.
It was chilly.
It was cold. I think 36, if I remember, was the degree temperature of the morning, so everyone was definitely cold, getting ready to go. But on our way out, now we'll get back to some of the morning, but what happened as far as going back and forth is the wagons went, we had a kind of a forward guard, a rear guard, and some flankers to begin with, and how did it start? How did the back and forth start? I'm trying to think.
Well, overall, we found out very quickly that the pacing of all the different branches did not coordinate well. Which was definitely a learning experience, because at least I went into this envisioning that you would have your wagons, the infantry marching neatly along the sides, and then your cavalry acting as the screen further out. But between managing mule teams and the draft animals pulling the wagons, they very quickly actually outpaced everyone because they really wanted to get going. And then the infantry were doing a great job. They kept a very consistent pace, and unfortunately, the terrain kind of murdered us all.
It did.
It was very treacherous terrain, very up, down, rugged hills, and unexpected turns in the trail.
Exactly.
And then the cavalry were kind of bouncing around everywhere, but we found out quickly that we didn't have enough guys to actually do the proper screening and vedette duty all around our escorting supply train.
Exactly.
And so we were immediately confined to the wagons themselves and not really out further where at least we thought we would be.
Exactly. We were ideally for cavalry being 500 yards out. Didn't end up being that way. We started with about 38 registered people. The week of, we had a lot of people drop out. We were supposed to have about 22-ish, I think, show up. And ended up, I think we only had about 18, I think, show up, something like that. But it was definitely a trip for sure. Kind of a quick review, a quick summary before we get into the details is the reason it ended early, because we were supposed to be at our second camp spot tonight and leaving tomorrow morning. But the Friday night was cold, but Saturday hit us hard. So not Saturday, today's Saturday. Friday hit us hard with a hard hailstorm. I mean, hard hailstorm. Most of our guys were caught out in it, out in the open country. Those of you who've seen pictures of this kind of country, there's no trees, there's nothing to hide behind or under. And
sagebrush is only so tall.
Yeah, so it was 6 inches tall sagebrush, right? But everyone got soaked. I mean, just soaked. At the same time, temperatures dropped. I believe that night it got just above freezing. I mean, 35-ish, I think, degrees when we were going back and forth. So that's when we woke up this morning. Of course, we had to split as a unit. We had Brevet Sergeant Lewis here, and he was taking care of the wagon team. I was taking care of a lost horse in the wilds of this open country with I don't know how many thousand square miles that we had to track that thing down.
I don't know how he gets stuck into these sort of things.
But we woke up today. The guys were wet, cold, freezing. A couple people had pre-onset of hypothermia, and so everyone woke up today and basically said we still have 10 miles to get out. It'll be a jaunt to get out. Some creek crossings that could have been dangerous.
Lots of mud.
Lots of mud, and then
had some difficulties with wagons crossing bodies of water a little bit the first day, and then the second day, after all the rain and hail, it was even more fun. But we managed to get through it.
So let's kind of quickly go through the kind of progression of things. So Friday, we check in, we do our briefing. Anything notable on Friday that you would like to share?
No, we just kind of set the stage.
Or sorry, Thursday, Thursday night. That's what I meant, Thursday night.
We set the stage for kind of the tone of the event regarding why we were actually there. We were trying to portray the 11th Ohio Volunteer Cavalry, ta-da, and also the 3rd United States Volunteer Infantry. They were stationed along the trails in this area, and we were basically escorting supplies from one station to the next along the trail. So we basically explained to everyone kind of who we were and what we're doing, and tried to get them in the mindset of what the job ahead would call for.
So then Friday comes. Friday, as every event is, and you guys know this who've been to events, getting a cohesive group of people together that can work together and function together efficiently from people who have never met each other is always difficult. Getting the teams going in the morning was difficult, although they were probably more on it than the cavalry was. There for a while, we waited on the cavalry. I'm trying to think of horse issue. Oh, we had a horse get loose. That's what it was. So first horse loose was in the morning, and it was one of those horses that does not want to get caught. So we probably spent a good hour and a half, I think, trying to chase down that horse. Finally got it saddled.
And we had him for dinner the next night.
Next night. I'm not. But seriously though. That was kind of that kind of put us off schedule a little bit. And then got together, divided our duties. And by this time, it was so much just of a cluster of people doing everything, and trying to get timing right. A lot of waiting around for the infantry. They got ready, and then they sat back down, and they got ready, and they sat back down.
Just like it was. I mean, the
hurry
cavalry,
up and wait, right?
Yeah, the cavalry are trying to deal with their horses and take forever to get going. The infantry are just standing on arms going, all right, guys, we need to get going.
Let's get going,
Holding us up.
Yeah, so we had that going on, and then finally, the mule team, the teams, they were antsy. They wanted to get going. In fact, all the horses were, they were antsy. It was cold, antsy, and they needed to get going. They're itchy, right? Mm-hmm. So we just had the teams go, and at that, as soon as the word go went, they were at the trot. These mules and these guys were at the trot. And because we hadn't worked with the teams before, these specific teams, they needed to get their legs stretched out, which quickly outpaced the infantry. Yeah, so they quickly outpaced the infantry, which is where things started to get strung out, right? And then so we go down into a creek area, our first creek crossing. I'm trying to no, we actually had a guy get bucked off too early on, the first mile. A guy got bucked off. That's fun. Got back on, go down a creek crossing. First wagon, what we had for these teamsters, we were supposed to have 3 wagons. One wagon was set up good to go. The second wagon was set up good to go with mules. The third wagon was kind of a smaller farm-type wagon that basically...
Wasn't their teams?
Their teams didn't work. They didn't get along, and so they had one that could pull and the other that couldn't. So at the last minute, they decided to have a kind of a tandem wagon. So they had 2 wagons hooked together with a unicorn type system, where basically 3 horses instead of 2 were pulling it in the front, which didn't work very effectively, mainly because of the training, I assume.
Keep in mind, historically, a lot of these freight wagons, any sort of army wagon, are supposed to have between 4 to 6 mules or horses pulling them at a time. And it's hard enough trying to find wagons with just a pair of animals, draft animals nowadays in the modern age to pull them, let alone a whole complete
4 up or 6 up.
Synced up 4 or 6 up team to pull wagons.
That is probably one of my biggest lessons, because before this event I was completely ignorant on anything team based or wagon based, and it is no duh why a 4 up is minimum, because we're 3 miles into this 20-mile, 30-mile trek, and they were already tired. They were exhausted. I mean, these two horses that were pulling the tandem wagon, it was too much for them to begin with. And we had it loaded down with freight. I mean, we had another barrel of bacon, had a lot of hardtack boxes, had 2 sacks of grain that weighed 150 pounds apiece. I mean, a lot of weight, and they couldn't do it. And so they got stuck in this creek. So what was your experience about that first creek crossing?
The first creek crossing was pretty much, I wasn't expecting it, but I got a total Oregon Trail experience moment right there.
How so?
Where I'm just kind of sitting on the horse on the far shore watching the wagons bog down in this little muddy stream crossing. And, the teamsters swearing and, trying to get the teams going again. And they can't get going. There's no momentum to pull or push them through the mud there. And so we had guys dismounting and infantry guys were jumping in and, getting on the wheels and pushing it, just trying to get it going again. And I can easily see why it would take at least a day for some of the larger campaigns that occurred in the Indian Wars. Where you have to get your supplies across the river. That's all you spend the day doing. And we spent, an hour getting
we spent
two wagons?
Easily an hour getting that one wagon unstuck from the creek.
Yeah.
And we had all, 4 or 5 guys pushing on the wheels, pulling on the wheels, in a safe position and everything. But no, that was obviously that creek crossing was a good experience. A good period experience, I think.
It was a pain at the time.
It was a pain.
But we learned something.
It was very good, very good. So then we get across. The other wagon with the mules, they did just fine getting across. And so we get up on, and from a, leader perspective, this is where I should have seen some light bulbs coming on. We had a couple of guys asking how much further to the campsite. So we're 3 miles in, and there's already people asking, hey, my feet are tired. I can't. I'm having a hard time, and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of one where some of the fatigue started setting in. About 3 miles in. Now this is not 3 miles on pavement. This is 3 miles of gravelly, dirty, muddy, rocky. I mean, kind of pretty much. It's a
mixture of all of the above.
Basically it's whatever the terrain, whatever the soil of that terrain is.
We had sand at some places.
Yeah, we had sand. Yeah.
And it was just, it was very unpredictable a lot of the times, and very uneven.
Which is what they ran into originally.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So then we get up going, everyone gets across the river, and we go another couple miles, get up on there's about 2 or 3 decent hills, and from really trying to pull out of the creek to these 2 or 3 decent hills, these mule teams and these horse teams were spent. Mm-hmm. They were spent for sure.
Yeah, so we got Oregon Trail Round 2. The live version, so we actually got to the point where we're going, okay, we need to lighten the load.
Throw stuff out of the wagon.
What do we need the least? And so we have guys, we don't need this, and so you see these heaps of supplies and boxes and stuff
everywhere
that we don't need. We're trying
scattered on the trail.
Yeah, and we were joking that we needed to have, the little tiny piano,
right?
And
throw out grandma's piano,
grandma's wardrobe, the little what are they called, wash basin stand, and all that stuff.
And we were throwing out. We're 4 miles into it now. 4 miles out of a 10-hour day, or 4 miles out of a 10-mile day, and horses were already fatigued. The mules were already fatigued.
The guys
are fatigued, and and so we're starting to throw stuff out. When we brought some of the extra stuff, we brought extra blankets and extra stuff, and we were throwing some of that out. So it's kind of hard decision because we knew it was going to get cold the next night.
Yeah.
So next key point for you then, what would it be? Elevation.
It was, I think, an amazing moment where you get up after another hill, and then you see this huge valley opening up before you, and there is absolutely nothing out there.
That's right, because right on top of the hill after the creek crossing, you could probably see for 5 miles, or 3 or 5 miles, just a huge basin.
It's nothing.
Gorgeous.
Nothing but sagebrush. We saw lots of wildlife while we were out there. I got to see a horned lizard.
Little
horned toad.
Antelope everywhere.
Antelope everywhere. The day before we saw some elk running around, golden eagle, lots of little songbirds. Yeah, my favorite. And what else? Oh, the Wild Mustangs. Yes, they paid us a visit. We're trying to march these wagons through, and which herd was that?
I don't know what management district it
Is
is.
it Green Mountain?
I have no idea.
I can't remember. But the Wild Mustangs came in, so this stallion and his little harem came trotting by. There's a pretty good-looking little colt in there as well.
Yeah.
But
all wild horses. Yeah.
All wild horses, and we're trying to go through. The advance guards are just kind of going, okay.
What do we do?
Yeah, and just, stay where you are and just keep an eye on things. And that stallion was trotting back and forth and kind of snorting and pawing, and so everyone was a little tense for a while, but then finally they kind of snorted, sniffed at us, and then they all turned tail and just went right over the ridge. But it was very amazing to see it that close. And slightly
I will say from being in the rear, so you were up with the wagons, being in the rear, trying to look after the infantry, because by this point, we probably had a good half-mile gap, I think, at that point, between the infantry and the wagons, and of course the advance guard of the cavalry. And, we were right there, we were already starting to string out. So I was in the back, and when we could see that big basin, it was kind of neat, a cool picture of, we had got our wagons with flankers and rear and forward guard. You could see that from afar. It looked neat. I mean, it looked, from an experience perspective, it looked pretty neat. So then, all we did is climb. I mean, it just kept going higher and higher and higher in elevation. And this is where we had guys kind of basically drop out. Guys were tough. I mean, they're trying as hard as they can. We had one guy blow his shoe out like halfway through. So he had to walk basically with pretty much with no sole for another 4 miles probably, kind of flopping in the wind there. So that's a good experience for him, I'm sure. But man, that guy had a great attitude. Yeah, he was like, keep coming.
All of them did.
They did.
They kept pressing on. They were right up to the end. They wanted to be there. So it was challenging, but definitely a lot of work. But I think that there were a lot of different little neat moments that we got to share. And kind of see things in history that you read about, or
Right. Well, we experienced a lot of those things that you read about.
All in the same morning.
All within like a 4-hour window. Bucking horses, people bucked off, chasing horses, throwing stuff out of the wagons, getting a wagon unstuck. Teams not being able to pull it. All those experiences, and of course, like I said, stringing out our column. And so toward the end of the day, we get to our campsite at 2 o'clock. I timed it as 2 o'clock when the advance guard got to the campsite, I believe. And we get there, you guys set up camp, very, very nice, start gathering firewood, and we start picketing our horses, right? We're hobbling, some hobble, some picket. I mean, there's nothing to tie your horses to, nothing to tie a high line to, there's nothing. And so we're hobbling and picking them, and one of the horses that was hobbled, that's what was going on there, sorry. We were going to go back and check on the infantry. So we came in, make sure you guys were doing good. We were going to go back, because by that point in time, I bet the infantry was probably a mile back. We were going to go check on them, and then one of the horses started following us, because we were going up the hill, and just, how horses can go with hobbles.
Hey, wait, come back.
Come back, And horses with hobbles, man, they can, that horse went at a gallop with hobbles on. So he was chasing, which got another horse to come along with hobbles, and spooked another new horse, a green cavalry horse, that was an ex-Mustang, so he was in his home.
Yeah,
he was in his home turf, and Mustang got loose with the picket pin and ran after us.
And that set all the rest, not all of them, but the other two that had started to follow.
Just galloping.
They all took off.
Full speed. With 2 of them with hobbles, the Mustang with the picket pin dragging behind them. They
didn't stay there long though.
No, they didn't, not at all. And so then we're riding up the hill to get to the infantry guys, and they ride to us and stay for just a second, and then boom, go. To the 2 hobbled horses, they stay there. We get some cav guys to bring them back to camp. But that Mustang, that's when we split as leadership.
And that's the last we ever saw of Lieutenant Dacus.
Exactly. So
I got breveted to command of the whole column.
Yeah, so you basically, Craig and I went after this wild Mustang that with a picket line, chasing after its tail, which puts you in charge of the entire wagon. Basically from that point forward to this morning. You were basically breveted the wagon master.
didn't want to be.
It didn't want to be, because so our side of things, Tom and I chased the horse all over. All over.
Okay. So we mentioned you probably saw on the little satellite tracker thing.
Yeah. Yes.
That you could watch our progress. Well, Steve forgot he has the tracker device in his saddlebag.
So you saw my progress. I was going back and forth. I probably put, I don't know, 25, 26 miles on that day, the first day.
Yeah. So technically, all of us were not strangely confused, wandering around in the desert, wondering where we should go.
Back and forth and back and forth. Yeah.
It was mostly Steve trying to chase this horse.
Yeah.
Basically went all the way back to the starting point, and then he had to come all the way back out to us.
Yeah.
And kind of check on everyone that got into camp, and we kind of went from there.
Yeah, and by the time toward the end where we were catching the horse is the time that it started raining. And describe the rainstorm, if you will.
Well, when we started this little journey, we watched the rainstorms move around us.
To the north, yeah.
To the north repeatedly, about 6 or 7 times. And these little nasty-looking clouds would come in, and then they just skirt around. Well, that's different when you're basically where they start skirting around.
Yeah, all right.
Day, or that evening. And so what ended up happening, the clouds moved in. We managed to get most of our shelters up in time, a good portion of the guys. Yeah. And the
little fire started even too.
Little tiny fire. We got a very quick bite to eat. Those of us that had our utensils prepared and had rations ready. But at the early on in the storm, it just sprinkles a little bit, and then all of a sudden it just opens up.
It opened the floodgates.
And it's just pouring, and everyone at that point is going, okay, so they kind of edge more towards their canvas, and for those who had shelter halves set up, the Teamsters all headed to a tent that they set up, and some of the more entrepreneurial soldiers jumped into the back of the empty wagon that had supplies taken out of them.
Yeah.
And
it dumped.
It dumped, and then it started to hail, and it just got harder and harder, and we're checking on the animals, but there's only so much you can do when there's no cover anywhere.
And no, for us, when it started raining, we were just about to get ready to catch the horse. Finally got up to it after 20 miles of chasing it, and at a full gallop too. Well, I guess primarily at a trot, but there was times that we were basically cowboying it. But that's when it started raining, is when we were about ready to catch it. And it started to, like I said, sprinkle a little bit, but then it just, floodgates of rain, and then the hail came. So much hail for us that it actually, about an inch of hail, made it look like snow. We had hail snow covering the ground.
We had buckets around the camp that, you couldn't see the bottom with how much hail had fallen into.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was definitely another grand experience.
A lot of guys said they've never been hailed on at an event before.
Yeah. The largest size hail were probably marble sized that were coming down, that I saw at least.
Agreed.
But then fortunately, you see all these guys peeking out of these tents and out of the backs of the wagons, and there's a little speck of light to the south.
I saw that.
The breeze, and this point, the breeze is starting to kick up, and you can see the clouds blowing away, and the little light patch getting bigger and bigger, but it's taking forever.
Blue skies.
Yeah, the men are just calling and praying for it.
Right.
Stop, please. Send it out of there, and finally it cleared up.
Yeah.
But by that point, everything was soaked. There's no dry spot.
Right.
And what dry spot there is directly under whoever was,
And basically,
on the ground.
It's this moment that things kind of really took a turn for the worse, because I had guys on the way out today, when we left, I had guys say that if it was wet and warm, no big deal. Cold and dry, no big deal. But it hailed, and everyone got soaked. I know I was outside, and I got soaked, and then the temperature dove. That night, the
sun went down, the temperature dropped, and then that breeze kicked up, and it was a cold breeze.
So it was 34 degrees, because I was up top and I could check it. 34 degrees with a very brisk wind, 20 mile an hour?
Yeah.
I say 20 mile an hour. So everyone's wet. 34 degrees, 20-mile-an-hour wind, all night long.
And our firewood by this point is soaked.
Yeah, it's soaked. We can't do anything.
We actually managed to get a fire going after the storm by actually dismantling Sergeant Gwynn's lovingly created bread boxes back here. Technically we only used one of the supports here, but that effectively meant that the lid was no good. But we used the lid well as well. We were kneeling on it so we didn't have to be down in the mud. But we got the fire going, and we had a watch. We kept the fire going all night, and basically just tried to survive.
Yeah. In the meantime, for us, up on top of the hill, because the other teamster that dumped his wagon, they were still messing with their wagon during all this too. Mm-hmm. So that night, you guys were at the campsite. We were up on top of the hill at the starting location, which was a primitive location because we had shuttled our vehicles to what we thought the ending point would be. Mm-hmm. And so we're up there, and so we camp out there. You guys camp out at your place.
10 miles away.
10 miles apart from each other.
Yep.
And dealing with our own little world.
And you finally caught that horse, right?
We finally caught that horse, exactly. And then the next morning, this is during the storm. It's still raining hard, and I know that the firewood at that first campsite was basically sparse. I mean, the whole intent was sparse wood, sparse vegetation. Mm-hmm. Have a little bit of a cooking campfire for coffee in the morning. That's it. But with cold, wet, and all this, I knew that you guys needed more firewood. Yeah. So what I did is I loaded a whole bunch of firewood up in the truck.
Big chunks that would burn a while.
Yeah, big chunks that you could have.
I wanted just the little tiny
flaming, twigs. Raging. I wanted you to have the option of a raging fire because you can't get too behind on the hypothermia idea thing. And so I got in with the truck barely because it was a mucky, messy road. Maybe I'll show you guys a picture of my truck, but. Get in there, unload the wood. Basically, you and I talk about when you guys wake up in the morning. We'll be riding back in on horseback, trying to catch up with you guys. You guys can wait for us, or you can do whatever you want. So that morning, you guys wake up. How did you talk?
Basically, once it was light enough and everyone was awake, the Teamsters were starting to kind of rouse up and get out of their blankets and whatnot. And by that point, all the soldiers are just kind of huddled around the fire to get warm anyway because we're all shivering.
Yeah. I mean, there was a couple guys that were seriously shivering.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. But I asked them, no, I didn't ask them anything. I'm the one in charge. I told them.
Yeah,
don't use that.
You're the one in charge.
So we had a meeting in the morning, and I said that you were going to be coming in and to basically pick us up, and you were on horseback.
Yeah.
Basically we were going to turn around because of the conditions of the weather. The
trail was impassable at that point.
Yeah, the predicted route, and we found out later today after driving it just to kind of get out of there. We would not have made it if we actually took the wagons all the way out.
No, yeah. I mean, that rainstorm
especially because of that downpour. I mean, their washouts were pretty bad.
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 huge washouts that happened because of that rainstorm.
Yeah. Because of this, Steve had decided already by noon the previous day that
it's not going to work.
It's just not going to work, especially because of our rate of travel and how the animals were handling it.
I mean, they were exhausted. I mean, before it rained, just they 2 up. A 2 up cannot pull.
Yeah, a good number of
a good wagon.
Yeah, sorry, I cut you off there. A good number of the guys that made it to camp, the first thing they did was just kind of flop down after they got a good drink, and they just I passed out for about 15 minutes straight, and then got up and tried to start doing stuff.
So that morning you guys woke up and pretty much everyone was in the same consensus?
Yeah, it was like, all right, it's just...
Well, how was the night?
The night, it was cold, the breeze kept blowing, we issued extra blankets. Fortunately, we had some buffalo robes that we passed around to some of the guys that really needed it.
Good.
We had ponchos...
trying to keep as warm as possible,
as
dry as
trying
possible.
To stay dry and layer up, and we kept the fire going all night. And basically we decided that there's no point in waiting for you to come back. I mean,
because we left at basically 6-ish.
Yeah,
6:30-ish.
about when we were kind of having our meeting.
Yeah.
And basically, just had the consensus. We wanted to get a hot meal. We had coffee going to get everyone warmed up. We used the last of the canned peaches. We actually, in a stroke of genius, we actually heated the canned peaches over the flames there, and we had some hot peaches for breakfast, which was actually very good.
You realize that was not for you guys.
Well, we took command of the situation. And
whatever was on the wagon, right?
Yep, we had to lighten the load on the way back, so we were helping out.
That's good.
And then basically all the horses were saddled, everything that we had left was loaded up, and we hit the trail probably about 7:30, 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And the weather by this point is misty. We basically woke up in the clouds based off of the altitude. What was it, about 7,500 feet?
Yeah, 74 on the low end, 7,600 on the high end.
Okay, yeah. So we wake up in this misty cloud. You're moving around camp, and you just feel the damp on your face. And
of course, everyone's blankets and everything is just
your hat, your hair. Everything is just covered
at 34 degrees.
At 34 degrees with dew and mist and all of this. So it's
just above freezing.
Just about freezing. Everyone was shivering. We just decided we might as well just get the heck out of there.
Pack up and leave.
And we're going to go back on the same route that we had talked about before you headed out. And got on the road. And the animals were on the same key as the people.
Guys, right? They want to get out of there too.
They walked with a brisk step. The infantry guys headed out on a brisk step. They got a head start.
Yeah. So you let the infantry get a head start.
Yeah. Just you read a lot of accounts, and it took us a day to figure this out.
Yeah.
But you read a lot of accounts in the 1860s, the 1870s and 1880s, and so on during the Indian Wars, where the infantry would start out early in the morning. Like we talked about, they're waiting around all the time.
Right.
Might as well go.
Yeah.
So they went, and they got a good head start. By this point, the cavalry are saddled. They're done playing around catching horses.
Right.
The wagons are all hooked up. We head out, and they got a really good head start. Got some good mileage on us, and I think we passed them after maybe an hour.
Yeah. And
historically though, you would see once about noon, everyone would stop. And get a noonday meal, and the infantry would usually eat on the march or very quickly, and they just keep plowing ahead. The soldiers stop. The cavalry stop and rest the horses, feed them a little bit, give some water, make coffee, whatever, and then they hit the road again. And so by the end of the day, you actually end up in about the same spot.
Exactly.
And so we were kind of experimenting around with that, not intentionally, it just kind of happened. It just made the most sense at the time. Right. But you just get another neat little historic, like, oh wow, this actually is how it should be done.
So basically, we came out a day early, half a day early, I guess, or a day early. Came out early. Everyone, we're here right now, not back at home, but we would have been out there for another half day tomorrow had we have stayed. But everyone had 2 good hard days of campaigning, and everyone for the most part that finished it, they said they enjoyed it, they loved it, learned a lot of lessons and also a lot of period moments as well.
Yeah.
What's nice about coming out west to Wyoming or anything like this place, you get to experience the distance, the environment of an actual campaign. What would you say your biggest takeaway was from this event?
My biggest takeaway, I think, is kind of getting thrown into a leadership role that I've never really had before.
But you have experience, though. It's not like you're a private of 2 years. You have experience.
Some, yeah.
But sorry, I
don't
interrupted you there.
Yeah. I don't like to think of myself as an expert, because I'm not.
Yeah.
I know some things. I try to teach some things, and I definitely try to learn some things when I'm out doing these events. And when I got kind of hurled into this leadership role, I think I think I would have planned things a little differently, actually.
How so?
Logistically, I didn't like the aspect of getting stretched out like we did.
Oh yeah, agree. We were by the end of it. We were probably 2 miles from front to back.
Yeah, and I mean it's communications
with, like,
report.
10 dudes.
I mean we talked about this before we planned, but we were we were short of people in order to actually fulfill the role.
Well, we were
that
expecting
we were trying
22 or no 18 no 22 to show up.
Of cavalry.
Of cavalry, yeah.
We were expecting 18 to 22 cavalry soldiers and then around 8 to 10 infantry. But due to various circumstances, people weren't able to make it and things didn't work out. So we had a very small core group to work with, and that severely limits your ability to fulfill the role of guarding these wagon escorts.
It does, very much so.
And so I think as a commander of a column like that, you really have to be aware of where everyone is and what is the primary goal of this mission.
Right. Is it to protect the wagons, or is it? Are we just moving? Is it the infantry protects themselves? Cavalry, are we independent?
Are we just moving from point A to point B?
Right.
And we all kind of sat down at the end of the day and we talked about this after this was all said and done.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a big learning moment for a good number of us.
Oh yeah.
I mean, sometimes this is the first time I've done something like this before.
Right.
And actually done it instead of read about it historically.
Exactly.
And I mean, you can read all these diaries and accounts of, move supplies 26 miles today to Sweetwater Station.
Yeah, one little blurb.
Yeah.
And it included our 2-day thing.
Yeah, and we were joking because in the evening, in all of this misery, it's very hard to find that little glimpse of sunshine.
Right.
And so we were kind of just embracing the terrible weather and all of this awful sores and misery together. And we were saying, "Dear diary, made 10 miles today, good grass, bad water, and terrible weather."
Yeah, it was just simple a diary.
Yeah, and it's because you read a lot of these diaries from the Oregon Trail, and that's basically what they would do. Or some of the soldiers.
Yeah.
They don't put much in some of these diaries. It's just this little, it was
a horrible day.
Yeah, the temperature registered 30 below zero.
Yeah. Right.
And the mercury refused to register in the awful winter, whatever. But I mean, you only get these little sentences, but there's so much into it. I mean, you read this and then you actually experience that sort of a circumstance, and I mean, holy cow, it is.
Oh, it was a great learning experience. I mean, even though we did last 2.5 days, lasted 2 days, and we learned a lot. I say my biggest takeaway. It got more on the material culture things than on the leadership side of things. I think very shallowly, apparently. But my biggest takeaway is it's always the same for me for horses. Horses are a pain to deal with, right? You gotta love them, but you also hate them, right? And we, the first campsite, we started, picket pins and hobbles and stuff like that. The picket pins didn't work because the soil was so soft that they would pull them right out. Also at the same time, there was enough dew on the ground that made the ropes wet and soggy, which was easy to break then if you didn't have a brand new hemp rope, right? At the same time, hobbles, you could, that Friday, we wake up from that Thursday night, and we got a couple horses, quarter mile, maybe half mile down the ridge that we have to go get. And so, dealing with that, and we don't have, enough wagons to corral them inside the wagons either. And so dealing with how do you let the horses eat and graze at the same time without tying them up and not letting them eat and graze, but yet being available. That's always one thing the horse aspect always interests me a lot, but always trying to improve things. I don't have a solution because none of those solutions worked.
And it's very easy to see why it was such an issue with the Army having a good number of their livestock run off by the various Indian tribes.
Well, it'd be easy to.
Yeah.
Even in the hobbles.
Yeah.
And
And we tried to kind of incorporate that when we did guard duty
Yeah.
the first night, watching the horses and stuff, and keep an eye on the camp and the fire and
Well,
whatnot.
there was no way to in moonlight.
Well, no, there's no moon. Okay, this guy
new moon.
orders us to keep watch and keep track of all 14 horses that are on the premises. It's pitch black out there. You can't even
Well,
see.
to give you an idea how black it was with this new moon, we had one of our troopers run into the butt end of a horse, just ran right into it, face just boom right into it because
Didn't even know he was
didn't
there.
even know the horse was there, and he ran. I mean, the butt end of the horse was right there. Boom, slammed it in. Thank goodness the horse didn't kick him.
Yeah.
But startled him, startled the horse. But that's how black it was. Yeah. So, one last comment. Well, how would you sum up this event that ended early?
Memorable.
Memorable.
Very, very memorable.
See, that's what we do at the 11th OVC. We
Yes.
have memorable. Those of you who've been a part of our other 3 or 4 events that we've held, they're all memorable, I believe, in the very sucky kind of way.
Yes.
They're all miserable, I think. Memorable because they're miserable.
Yeah.
But they are very. What I like about what we do is they're very authentic. We don't stage water buffaloes. We get water where the guys would have gotten water. We were on the original California Trail.
Yes, it was the Seminole.
The Seminole cutoff
Yeah.
of the California Trail, and we got water where the guys would get water, even though there was a 5-mile gap, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, there was a 7-mile gap, 7 miles before you got any water.
Yep.
And so, I mean, I think that's something to experience and is important versus staging water buffaloes or anything like that throughout the event. Although it'd be nice, I would love more water, but it's not realistic.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's your takeaway is memorable. My takeaway is another. I don't know if it's say successful, but everyone who finished it enjoyed it. They had a good period experience, and even though we came back early, I think it was a memorable trip.
So back to memorable again.
Yeah, back to memorable, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely not camping. You know,
No,
in the sense of oh let's go
Let's
and
go,
have
yeah,
our
no,
little
yeah,
camper
there's no
and,
camping,
and
yeah.
have the marshmallows and
Yeah.
s'more stuff together.
It's misery. That's for
It's
sure.
misery, and it definitely gives you multiple glimpses what these guys experienced on a daily basis, and I think it's important that we remember that. And for me personally, I don't enjoy the misery aspect of it, but I enjoy understanding and physically doing these activities
It
where
makes you
it's like,
understand it.
okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
Moving a wagon across a creek in mud.
In mud, and you're ankle deep, shin deep in mud.
Yeah,
Pulling on the wheels.
it is not as easy as it sounds. I mean, that's a horrible thing to compare. Moving a wagon through that's stuck in the mud ought to be easy. No,
Right.
it's until you're actually there or even just watch it.
Right.
I mean, you understand a little more, just a little glimpse more of what they actually experienced.
Exactly.
And I was fortunate enough. I came away with about 5 or 6 little
Good takeaways.
as far as most of it was wagon related because I was stuck with them most of the time. But just from background knowledge, from what we have personally read, now we're actually experiencing it, and you can line them up perfectly and say that this, while it was miserable, it was a constant occurrence in the duties of maintaining the
This was an everyday thing. They did it, and next week they'll do it again.
This was a constant duty that was required in maintaining the overland trails.
Yes. And on that note, we'll end it there. Appreciate it. Just want to give everyone an update of why we're here early and why family members saw a whole bunch of zigzagging on the trip. So thank you for watching. Sign up for another event hosted by the 11th OVC. Otherwise, ride hard.